is Indian Country Today.
Sego, thank you for joining us. I'm Vincent Schilling, and I'm sitting in for Patty Talahunga. An Oklahoma man is slowly recovering from a fall he took that originally left him paralyzed. Ryan Knight, who is Choctaw and Cherokee, was in Tulsa at a Black Lives Matter protest on May 31st when a truck drove through the crowd and forced him to fall 20 feet off an overpass on Interstate 20. He broke vertebrae in his neck and back and also fractured his pelvis and shoulder blade. He is paralyzed from the waist down. Doctors hope once the swelling goes down, Knight could make a full recovery. So first it happened in Virginia, and now protesters have torn down two more statues of Christopher Columbus, one in Boston, the other in Minnesota. As protesters gathered at the state capitol in St. Paul, Minnesota, they tied ropes around the 10-foot-tall bronze statue and yanked it down, danced around it while state troopers watched and did not intervene. And across the country in Boston, the Columbus statue was beheaded. Boston Mayor Marty Walsh said they will remove the statue and place it in storage until they decide what to do with it. The statue has been a target multiple times and was first beheaded back in 2006. It was doused in red paint in 2015, and Walsh says the city should discuss the historical meaning, then decide if it should ever go back up. Many other Columbus statues across the nation were vandalized. One in Houston, Texas was vandalized with red paint for a second time. It has been defaced multiple times in the past. State-recognized tribes may get some COVID-19 relief if Senator Cory Booker is able to convince the Senate. He sent a letter to his colleagues in the Senate urging them to provide relief to state-recognized tribes. Across the country, there are 65 state-recognized tribes. Because they do not have federal recognition, they have not received federal assistance. Booker says the state-recognized tribes are struggling to meet their health needs. The letter calls for state funding so tribes can be assisted with outreach, direct financial assistance for families and businesses, personal protective equipment, medical supplies, and housing and nutrition assistance. Now for the latest numbers of COVID-19 in Indian Country, let's go to Jordan Bennett-Begay, our Washington editor. Jordan?
Vincent, we have updates of COVID-19 cases and deaths from 7 tribes across the country. Here are the latest numbers from our database. There are 9,430 positive confirmed cases and 374 deaths in the Indian health system. Again, that is a total of 9,430 positive confirmed cases and 374 deaths as of June 11th. The Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina reported 7 new cases. This gives the tribe a total of 50 cases with more tests pending. In Mississippi, the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians have 11 new cases. That brings their total to 756 cases for the tribe and 43 deaths in total. The Winnebago tribe in Nebraska reported 6 new cases in the last 24 hours. The tribe now has a total of 61 cases and 1 death. In Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation reported 5 more cases, bringing their total to 108 cases. The Navajo Nation, that spans across Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Utah, are reporting 125 new cases and 7 additional deaths. The White Mountain Apache tribe in Arizona announced 44 new cases and 2 additional deaths. They have a total of 1,100 cases and 14 deaths. Also in Arizona, the Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian community saw an increase of 9 cases. The tribe now has a total of 56 cases, with 22 cases being within the community boundary, and 11 are tribal members who live outside of the community boundary. I think with the way that Salt River Pima really reports their data, talks about the complexity of it, because a lot of tribal health clinics are testing Native people and non-Native people. And so Indian Country Today includes both of those numbers, because not only we include tribal citizens, but also people, non-natives, who are using tribal health resources, because that's the monies that are coming from the tribe themselves.
Yeah, it seems like it's taking a lot of resources off the tribes to keep all this testing up. Have you seen a lot of that?
I haven't seen any specific numbers, but I know that that's one of the reasons why the COVID-19 relief funds are so important, and why, again, the census is so important too, because the tribes use the data from the census, which is now happening, they use those numbers to allocate these funds to different tribes, and so that's very helpful when they when it comes to funding in these situations.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jordan. I appreciate you reporting on these numbers today, as always.
Yeah, Vincent.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, folks. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm Vincent Schilling, and I'm sitting in for Patty Telehongva. If you follow the native actors in the world of the arts and entertainment industry, whether it be film, television, or fine arts, and even professional dance, you likely know our guest today. He is Nehiyaw actor Michael Greyeyes. His community is the Muskeg Lake Cree Nation in Saskatchewan, Canada. And Michael Greyeyes has made a serious mark in the world of television and film. He has portrayed such high-profile roles as Kayla Taka Walker in Fear the Walking Dead, the leader of the indigenous zombie thriller Blood Quantum, and Sitting Bull in Woman Walks Ahead with Jessica Chastain. He also played in True Detective and the character of Jimmy Saint in Netflix V-Wars. His latest work that has recently hit HBO is I Know This Much Is True, starring the world-known actor Mark Ruffalo. Perhaps you know Mark Ruffalo. Today, we are going to talk with Michael Greyeyes at his home in Toronto, Canada, about his film career and where things are going for him. So, Sego, Michael, and welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you very much, Vincent. It's an honor to be here.
I'm glad to have you. Before we really get started into your career, so to speak, we are in a pretty volatile climate right now. Things are going on, a lot of activism, a lot of people, coming out to the streets. And there's no mistaking that looking at your social media posts, you feel strongly about this world's political climate. So what are your thoughts on things such as Black Lives Matter and the death of George Floyd and today's climate of protest and activism that you might see out in the streets today?
Yes, thank you. I feel incredibly strongly about social justice. As I watch the news with my family, we watch together. I'm sad, of course, the murder of George Floyd was a grotesque act and it enraged us. But what I see as a response to it, although I'm disappointed in all of us that it took the death of this man to motivate us to speak out and to act, to protest. I'm grateful that it seems there's a growing movement, a really powerful movement that goes beyond the boundaries of community and race to involve everyone of good conscience. So I'm watching the protests and I'm hopeful, maybe for the first time in a really long time, that we might be able to change the systems that have never served our communities. And that certainly devalue Black lives, that has ignored and devalued Indigenous lives and the lives of people of color. So as I watch this, I'm hopeful.
Interesting. I like that you say hopeful, because that's not necessarily a sentiment that you would think a lot of people might feel right now. And it's very interesting how, if you look at what's going on, and by the way, if dogs bark in the background, we welcome this on this program. So, but it's very interesting that you say hopeful, because in the midst of all this, I think people are wanting to learn more about what's going on with history. I mean, part of our broadcast this time was talking about Columbus statues being torn down, about this social activism, saying we want to know the real history. What are your thoughts about people tearing down stuff like that, or at least dismantling maybe what this structure has been for so long?
I'm very excited by the potential for change. I think dismantling is a great word. I think when I see these statues come down, when I see city councils like the one in Minneapolis say, this system does not work for everyone, and that we must seek a new way, I think dismantling is exactly the right term. Mm. We live in settler states. The United States of America and Canada are both settler states. settler states that have been built on indigenous lives and built with Black labor. And I look at the very systems that allow these nations to exist, and I think we must actually dismantle those systems that create injustice. For me personally, I've always been very active in terms of using my voice as a public person, and certainly my voice as an artist and educator. So when I see the statues come down, I'm actually happy. No nation with good conscience puts up statues of people that have created misery and death. In Germany, there's not many public statues of Adolf Hitler. So when I look at Confederate statues, when I look at the statues of Columbus, I'm reminded that the state doesn't view those people as villains. They make them into heroes, and that disappoints me.
Yeah, very interesting. It brings a lot of thoughts in my mind as I'm hearing you talk, and I have respect for what you do, and you are an educator as well as an actor, and I want to talk about a little bit and ask you about some of the work that you do, of course, because as we've kind of starting possibly to see COVID fade just a little, not quite, but start to kind of go away a little bit, I'd like to talk about some of the work you do as an actor, and one of the most notable, it is I just recently reviewed, as a matter of fact, and interviewed Mark Ruffalo, who spoke very highly of you. A lot of folks out there listening may or may not realize Mark Ruffalo plays Dr. Bruce Banner / Hulk in the Avengers movies. He recently came out with HBO's I Know This Much Is True, of which you were a part. So you play the character, Ralph Drinkwater, in I Know This Much Is True. And you interact with Mark Ruffalo a few times. And so how was it? How was it working on this project? And how was it interacting and working with Mark Ruffalo?
I'm so proud of the show. I think the work that Derek Cianfrance did, our writer and director, and of course Mark as the lead actor playing two roles in the miniseries, is extraordinary. The entire cast is mind-blowingly good. I'm watching everyone, from people with small supporting roles to people that are returning episode after episode, and I watch their work, and I'm just amazed at how truthful, honest, and direct their performances seem. So it was a great pleasure to work on the show, and all my scenes actually were with Mark, who is an extraordinary artist and ally, as you know, to many causes and communities, including Indigenous people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Mark Ruffalo, and I couldn't even put half the interview in print because we kept going off on all these really wonderful topics, talking about Standing Rock, talking about and the No Dapple movement and things that he did, and then talking about the cast that was with I Know This Much Is True. And again, like I said, he spoke highly of you, but I also review things. I through Indian Country Today, I review films and TV, and I gave it a perfect 10. And I gave very, very few perfect 10s, but I just thought it was exceptional. So one thing I wanted to mention, and without giving too much away, is that there is a moment with you and Mark where you kind of have a coming to turn. Like I don't want to give away if you haven't seen it, but there's just an interaction between you two, that maybe you could talk about without revealing anything.
Okay, so spoiler free. spoiler-free
There you go.
recollection. The character I play, Ralph Drinkwater, is a mixed race person. He's part African, he's part indigenous, and he in this community, Three Rivers, Connecticut, he's the real outsider. And I think as indigenous people, we've all been the other many, many times. So for me to approach this role was exciting and challenging. I know that Derek spent a long time looking to cast the role. He looked at people of mixed blood all over the Eastern Seaboard. It actually took about 3 months for him to interview, literally hundreds of actors. But I was fortunate that in the end he chose me because I really wanted a chance to work with Derek, work with Mark, but also to contribute another portrayal, another body, another piece of performance that would contribute to the way people understand our communities. For me, one of the final scenes that Mark and I had together was, revealing. It was written, of course, based on Wally Lamb's novel, but there were some sort of technical issues about cultural knowledge, etc., that it didn't sound authentic to me. And so Derek and Mark both spoke to me and said, how do we make this better? They came to the Indigenous person on set and said, what do you know? Help us. Mm. And I think that's really indicative of an approach by people with artistic rigor and cultural understanding. So I was very grateful that I had the opportunity to change the context of these scenes. It was really exciting for me.
Wow. So they listened to the Indigenous person. In the film industry, I don't even know if we could say that 10 years ago. That's just exceptional. I saw you recently tweet about the California governor, Gavin Newsom, saying they're going to officially open the Hollywood TV and film production doors June 12th. So does this mean you're ready to just jump right back in the mix? I know you had some projects that got put on pause when this whole COVID thing started.
Yeah, since the quarantines began, I haven't worked at all. And I read that report, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, June 12th, that's like tomorrow, practically.
Yes, it is, literally.
And just yesterday, I really didn't think that we'd be working until maybe July, perhaps August. But yesterday, my manager called and said, listen, we've just talked to one of the productions of one of the projects that had been interrupted by this. And they said they're looking to go end of June. And I was stunned. Wow. It's actually an indie film. So it's a smaller production. So I think smaller productions might actually go first because there's fewer crew, there's fewer cast. The idea of social distancing within a production context might be easier when you don't have hundreds of people working, in tighter spaces or sharing spaces. So that's a film called Wild Indian. And I think, let me just go again. So this project is a film called Wild Indian. It's written by Anishinaabe artist, writer, director Lyle Mitchell Corbin. And we began work on this project back in November. And then we had a hiatus. And then, of course, COVID-19 and the pandemic started. So that's the first project that's coming back. I'm very excited to return to it.
That's great. That sounds exceptional. I know I want you to get back to work. So, prior to, I know this much is true, you portrayed, and we've had an interview about this. We've talked about this before. We even had a Blood Quantum after party. You portrayed the main character, Sheriff Traylor, in Blood Quantum, which is a indigenous zombie movie by Jeff Barnaby, and was literally the highest financed indigenous film of its kind to date. How was that process? It was a blast of a film, and I just really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. I loved the project and how it turned out. Jeff Barnaby is a Mi'kmaq filmmaker, And he's an extraordinary talent, extraordinary filmmaker. And what I love about his work is that it's really profound, like on numerous levels, in terms of characterization, in terms of its engagement with history. But his films are also incredibly entertaining. So Blood Quantum, of course, dealt with colonial history and repeated trauma, dealt with male toxicity and the legacy of fatherhood and how that affects generations. Yet at the same time, it's like a ride in a stolen car. You know, it's fun. There's zombies everywhere. There's blood. There's violence. It's exciting filmmaking to watch.
Yes, and
But
let's not forget, indigenous people were immune to the zombie bite.
Yes, yeah. Jeff's really a remarkable talent, and the response to the film has been incredible. We had incredible numbers on Shudder in the U.S. and video on demand here in Canada. So I'm so pleased.
That's great. And there's some great actors: Cuba Gordon, Gary Farmer, Devery Jacobs, Forrest Goodluck, Brandon Oakes, Elmaya Tailfeathers. I mean, my gosh, it just goes on and on, you know. So, I have to go back just very quickly. And one of my all-time favorites was, of course, Kayla Taka Walker, Fear the Walking Dead. One of the best opening scenes to a character I've ever seen, where you walk out with this bloody machete dripping. It was just amazing. And you had a real fun story. We've got a few minutes left in the program, but you tell me a really cool story one time about your arrival at Comic-Con when you were Kayla Taka Walker. Can you tell us that?
Yeah, I loved playing Kawataka. Fear the Walking Dead, the third season, in which my character was introduced and I worked throughout the whole season, was an extraordinary experience. When we went to Comic-Con right in the middle of filming, I think we filmed 8 episodes, and then there was a break, and then we filmed the other 8. The experience in San Diego was electric. We were in Hall H. We came out with I think there was maybe 5,000, maybe more people in the audience, and as we were introduced one by one, the audience, it was like being at a rock concert, and our images were 50 feet high on these screens behind us, and I was really grateful for the exposure, grateful to be part of such a fantastic show. And again, excited to be part of a new kind of portrayal that we've been seeing more and more of on our screens and our television sets, in which Indigenous people are being portrayed in really 3-dimensional ways.
I think of myself as a young Native kid, who was completely immersed in comic books and reading X-Men to Avengers, the Hulk, all these things, and horror comics and watching films with actors. And I just cannot imagine being a young kid and be able to see Michael Gray Eyes on screen, back then. And what do you think it must be like for young kids today to see you? You've got just a little over a minute remaining, but I still just want to know, what are your thoughts to those kids now that are seeing what maybe you or I never could when we were kids?
Yeah, I think that's really a profound way of looking at our work. We're entertainers. We provide people with an escape from their lives, their quiet lives, their busy lives. But I think about Indigenous youth, and I know that when I was growing up as well, I didn't see my community reflected on screens. I didn't see heroes. So in my small way, I hope that the work that people like Elmaya, myself, Jeff, Kiowa, Forrest, I hope that the work that we're doing inspires people to think about careers in media, to think about careers as creators, as artists. That to me is hopefully one of the legacies of our work.
That's excellent. Well, Michael, I can tell you it inspires me, and I still feel like a little kid when I'm watching you. And I screamed sometimes when I saw you walking out with a bloody machete or on Blood Quantum and such forth. So Michael Gray Eyes, educator, actor, thank you so much for coming on today. I appreciate having you so much.
In my language. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, and thank you so much for watching today. My name is Vincent Chilling. I am sitting in for Patty Telogba, Nawen, and Ona. Appreciate you listening. Have a great day, and see you tomorrow.
This is Indian Country Today.